Thank you all for joining me to talk about Zero Trust today and what it's all about. All right. As a quick intro, my name is Arianna Willett. I go by Ari. I lead our security risk and trust program over at Okta, which means I oversee risk, compliance, M&A due diligence, customer assurance, policies, training, metrics, all kinds of fun stuff. Prior to Okta, I worked with Deloitte and Twilio for some time. Currently, I'm out in San Francisco, but I'm originally from New England. You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter or the Day of Security Slack channel. As per the rest of the talks, this one is being recorded, and I'm going to keep the chat down because I'm easily distracted, but I will check it after if you have questions, and then we can talk about them afterwards. So let's jump in. What is Zero Trust? So this is a term that people throw around a lot. A lot of conversations based on Zero Trust, and this talk is about what that means. So what does it mean? Does Zero Trust mean that we don't trust anything? That we as the security team remove the ability for anyone to access anything on a corporate network? You know, removing access to every resource on a corporate network means it's super secure. It can't be hacked because no one has access to anything. But it also means that no one can do any work, which means we, the security org, the people who removed access to everything, we get fired. So when we talk about Zero Trust, it's not actually Zero Trust. You do have to trust some things. So what is Zero Trust actually? Zero Trust is actually an approach that ensures the right people have the right level of access to the right resources in the right context. That access is secure and it's assessed continuously, which is a lot. It's a lot of things to think about. It's a lot of context that you need on one access request. So why do we need to do all of that? In order to answer that question, let's step back to talk about how we used to think about security and why we think about it in a Zero Trust way today, or why we should be thinking about it in a Zero Trust way today. Okay, so the old way of doing things is that you have a corporate network, you create a perimeter around it, you make sure that perimeter is really, really secure, and then everything inside that network trusts each other. So to put it in a picture, because pictures are always better, here's what it looks like. You have all of your computers, your laptops, your servers, your applications. Everything that happens within your corporate network is within the perimeter of the circle, and everything within that perimeter trusts everything else. Everything outside the perimeter is untrusted. This is also called a castle and moat approach to security. So you have your castle, it's your trusted network. You have your moat, it's your perimeter as your security. And then everything inside the castle is fine. Everyone can kind of walk around it. Continuing with that castle theme, I've created a fun slide to explain trusted networks. If anyone from the brand and marketing team at Okta is watching this, I am so sorry about this whole slide. Okay, so you have your castle. You can see that there are all of the coworkers, all the employees of the castle are so excited. They are in the castle. They have access to everything in the castle. In fact, they're even using laptops that you gave them. And then outside of the castle, outside of the perimeter, outside of the moat, are all of the untrusted folks shown in the bottom left. You definitely don't want them on your network. You don't want them in your castle. One drawback to this approach is that if all of those nasty folks outside of your perimeter, outside of your moat, break through, they then have access to everything within your corporate network, everything within your castle. Just keep in mind. Okay, so why am I here talking about the zero trust strategy and not the castle and moat strategy, not the secure your perimeter strategy? Essentially, the way that we work has changed. So while it's easy to take a network like this, put a really strong perimeter around it, and call that good security, it is impossible to do the same thing with a network that looks like this. Right now, just based on the way that we work, we have more cloud apps, we have a distributed workforce, we have bring your own device strategies and policies. And so you have more people, employees, partners, contractors who need more access to things. You've got on-prem apps, cloud apps, infrastructure as a service, APIs, and those people are logging on from more locations. So not just your office anymore, their home, the coffee shop, an airport, not right now with airports, but maybe someday, and also different countries. And you have all of that happening from all kinds of different devices. So not only your managed work devices, but your own personal phones, your own personal computers. Contractors may be bringing their own laptops. And so the traditional paradigm of in the network, you're trusted, and outside the network, you're not trusted, doesn't work anymore with this complicated distributed environment. And so we have to kind of rethink the way that we're thinking about security. Okay, so the new approach brought back those same folks from the castle, but now they're working in our distributed workforce. They're bringing their own devices. They need access to on-prem and cloud resources. They're no longer necessarily working within the safety of your corporate network, which means we don't manage those networks, and we now need to assume that they're not trusted. But they still need access to resources in order to do their jobs, which means we need to enable access regardless of their location, their device, or their network. We need to figure out how to move trust beyond the corporate network perimeter, beyond the castle walls, if you go back to the analogy. So in comes zero trust. Get my slides to work with me. Oh, shoot. Okay, you also have, forgot about these folks. Back to our castle folks. You also have your untrusted malicious actors who are trying to get access to all of these things. And so keeping up with all of your folks that are doing different things, working in a distributed model, they have their own devices. You also have folks that are trying to break into your network, and we need to make sure that we identify those folks and make sure they're not getting access to those same resources. Okay, now comes zero trust. So zero trust. Let's give the right people the right access to the right resources in the right context at the right time, and make sure all that access is secure. And on top of that, let's do it with as little friction as possible, because we don't want people authenticating their day away. So at this point, cool. We've figured out, okay, yeah, we're working in a different manner. We've got distributed workforces. We've got a lot more complications, essentially. Zero trust sounds great. These things sound great. How do we actually do that? How does it work in practice? Okay, let's start with the user and a device. In this case, I'll be the user. I am on my corporate managed laptop, and I'm trying to log into an AWS production account. We start pulling in context. Who am I? What am I trying to access? What device am I on? Where am I logging in from? Is it my home? Is it a country that I've never been to before? Are they logging in from a known network? So maybe the corporate network, or is it an unknown network like my own home network? Or am I at a coffee shop? You can take all that context, you can add third-party information. So in this case, maybe we're checking, is Ari's laptop patched? And then we take all that context and figure out whether or not these things mean that I can have access to the AWS production account that I've requested access to. And we're going to leverage all those signals to make that decision. So the context, my identity, the context around my login gets combined into a risk score, and that score can be associated with a policy, which is a bunch of gobbledygook. So what that actually means is if I have a high risk score, maybe I'm not allowed to access any AWS production accounts. But if I have a low risk score, I can. A simple example, and then you can get into much more complicated scenarios. And I want to pause here because this context piece, these decisions around access, this is really the crux of zero trust. Because you're no longer trusting everyone in your network, you need to figure out how to make informed decisions about who and what is allowed to access which resources and when they are allowed to do that. Once I've authenticated, I can get access to the things that I'm looking for, so Salesforce or AWS in my example. And then, of course, best practice is to log and monitor all of this activity. One thing to kind of mention now that we've gone through the whole process is that this decision, this risk decision, the risk score, and the access decision is not a thing that gets made one time. Risk scores can be updated continuously after I've authenticated as well. So if I have gone through the whole process, I'm now working in the AWS production account, I've got everything checked out, but I click on a phishing link and now my device is compromised, my risk score can change and my access to that production account may be revoked mid-session. And that's an important key piece of zero trust as well. Okay, so now that we've gone through what a zero trust model is and what it kind of looks like, let's talk about how to implement this model within a company. So this maturity curve has 4 stages to it. Your first stage, you have some identity solutions established, but you're really not using all of the tenets of zero trust. Your next step up, at this point, so this is kind of the unified identity and access management stage. You're approaching everyone from an identity or role-based access view and asking, what is it that we can give them access to? You're probably using single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and have unified access policies across your environment. You're also probably starting to move away from knowledge-based authentication, so passwords, security questions, et cetera, that are easily compromised via phishing attacks. And you're moving towards authentication factors like hardware devices, or YubiKeys, more people are familiar with, or biometrics. So more the something you have and something you are factors as opposed to something that you know. Your next stage is around contextual access. So this is the stage where you start adding those contextual clues that we talked about in the last slide. And again, those are kind of, what application are people trying to access? What device are they using to access that? What network are they coming in from? And do we know who this person actually is? And then those context clues are used to make decisions about what resources you're able to access. And then the last stage here, the adaptive stage. So 2 key things for me in this last stage. We talked about the context clues, and those are, in stage 2, they're kind of discrete pieces of information. So you know a thing about a device, and then based on that knowledge, you are able to make a decision. In this stage 3, the adaptive stage, these context pieces get combined and you start leveraging machine learning and kind of having that drive a risk engine to make decisions instead of using these discrete pieces of context and kind of having a decision tree around them. And then the other piece in stage 3 is continuous authentication. So I used the example in the prior slide on clicking a phishing link and having an active session terminated. That's that continuous authentication. You're continuously checking that the factors that you've decided are part of your risk posture are the same. And overall, this is a example implementation path for a zero trust. So like anything, you start building out the foundations and then you add more capabilities as you go along. If you're interested in learning more or want to see where your company is on the Zero Trust maturity curve, there's a link up on the screen. You can kind of go through a self-assessment and see where you are. Lastly, like all the other companies here, Okta is hiring. Just throw those on the screen in case people are interested. And lastly, to wrap up, I just wanted to give a huge, huge thank you to the folks behind Day of Security. This is an absolutely amazing event, and there's a ton of hard work that goes into putting this all together, especially this year being remote. There's all kinds of new logistical challenges to go through. So on behalf of myself, thank you. And on behalf of the community, thank you. Let me see. I don't know if I can see the chat. I will be at the Okta booth this afternoon. If people are interested in popping by and asking questions or talking more about Zero Trust, I'm always happy to answer questions or have a discussion about it. But otherwise, again, thank you to everyone at Day of Security, and thank you all for joining this talk.